Welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, of course, we are going to be talking about House of the Dragon Episode 8. I know that this episode is a little bit delayed. I usually get them out the day before I am recording this, but I wanted to get my Vesper review out and also my 60th episode, which will be on Catherine called Birdie, will be coming out after this one, so do stay tuned for that. Now, House of the Dragon Episode 8, just to kind of sum up, I don't want to give like a recap or play-by-play of what this episode is, but I did want to touch on some points that were really amazing to me in this episode. I think for sure Episode 8 is 100% one of the reasons why I completely love House of the Dragon. You have this premise that all of us are geared up for. All of us are waiting for this epic battle between dragons and, getting to see dragons fight. And that's what everyone tuned in for, right? And episode 8 was probably the furthest from that I think we've gotten so far this season. And it was probably by far my favorite episode so far. This one was so full of heart and so heartbreaking to me that there were multiple times that I found myself like choking back tears or actually crying. Paddy Considine, I think, is by far has like blown my mind as far as his betrayal of Viserys, especially in this episode. The walk, which if I can so say, the walk heard round the world, because this is the moment that I feel like most people are buzzing about on the internet right now, is the walk of Viserys from the doors of the throne room up to the throne was just heartbreaking to watch him give all of his effort and all of every ounce of strength that he has. And I think that really goes to Paddy Considine, to like the level of talent that he has as an actor, because being a whole and complete, healthy human being and having to portray this person who is being eaten alive by, I think Paddy has confirmed now that Viserys has a form of leprosy. So being eaten alive essentially by bacteria in your skin, like you are decomposing while you are living. It is the most terrifying thing that I can possibly imagine. To have to really portray that in such a way that the audience believes that struggle and believes that pain is a testament to him. Like, kudos. He deserves all of the praise that he is getting for that moment and for every moment in this episode. He is phenomenal. I mean, he is at this point in the episode, because we've jumped again another 6 years, which this is probably my biggest gripe with House of the Dragon, if I did have a gripe, was the time jumps. I understand their reasoning for it. Obviously they want to get into the dragon battles. That's what everyone's tuned in for. But the time jumps and the way that the actors are aging is just not consistent. And I wish that they had spent more time or had made the time jumps maybe not quite as large. I think the first time jump was like a decade, and this time jump now has been 6 years. And the only person I feel like that doesn't seem to age one bit is Sir Criston. He is still like his vampire horrible self, just pristine and like super young. I do not understand why they didn't like try to give him a little bit of gray at the temples or do anything to make him look like it's been 16 years from the first time that we saw him. But they've really done absolutely nothing, and it's the most frustrating thing to me. But beyond that, watching just the big jump between what Viserys looked like in the last episode and what Viserys looks like now, I was shocked, honestly, when you first saw him come on screen, when Rhaenyra goes to visit him, and he looks like just a shell of what he was before. But there were so many moments in this that you could tell there was just so much heart in it. And we know we're gearing up for a big battle. And I feel like this was one of those episodes that kind of, you needed that impact to know what what was being broken apart. We know that this family has never gotten along. We know that there have been issues for, a long time at this point. But there was just this brief moment, between Princess Rhaenyra and Alicent Hightower, where they've said their apologies to each other. You think it's going to be okay. And then, of course, Alicent misunderstands Viserys at the end of this episode, and it's all for naught. Like, everything is just out the window because Alicent thinks she knows what he's talking about when she has no clue. And I am like, I am at that point where I think the biggest thing for me in my hatred of Alicent is how absolutely psychotic her children are. And it just, I know it's not her fault because I don't think, it's definitely down to one of those nature versus nurture kind of conversations. And I absolutely don't think that parents are responsible for the personalities of their children, but certainly you can put some effort into some of the bad behaviors there. And just the moment, at the early part of this episode, where one of her sons has obviously forcibly done something to a maid, and her reaction to that is to, I think she killed this maid. It doesn't really show exactly what happened. She's forced to drink something, and I don't know if that was meant to be poison or just meant to ensure that she, would not have a child. But nothing then happens to her son. He is not held accountable in any way, shape, or form. And I think that is part of the reason why Alicent and Viserys' children are such horrible human beings, is because they do these terrible things and no one holds them accountable. And it isn't to say that Rhaenyra is this amazing and perfect and wonderful mother, but her children are a lot more well behaved, Granted, they do kind of have their little petulant outbursts when people are making fun of them and all of that thing, but they are still quite young, so it's sort of justifiable, whereas Alicent's children are quite a bit older. They're almost grown, if not grown at this point. And it's not a good look. And the idea of any of her children being on the Iron Throne is horrifying to me. So if I was Rhaenyra, I would go all out against ever allowing any of Alicent's children to be on the Iron Throne, except maybe her daughter, because I feel like her daughter is the least crazy one. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. It horrifies me to no end that they've got Vigar on their side, because it just literally the most psychopathic person has the oldest and most powerful dragon in the series at this point. But I think a lot of what happened in this episode is really just, it's meant to tie you into those characters, and meant to kind of really bring you to that point where you have officially picked a side, I think, whether you're fighting for the blacks or you're fighting for the greens. You really got to kind of see where everyone was and whether or not they can actually be peaceful and situated together. And I feel like in this episode, you see very much that despite best efforts, the Greens and Alicent's children are just not capable. They're just not capable. So even if they were to patch things up, I think it would all fall apart again as soon as the children were adults and were in charge. And, Rhaenyra and Alicent are no longer in the picture. Alicent's kids are going to go batshit cray on someone. So this episode was definitely one that was very heartfelt for me. Not only just seeing Viserys and how completely lifeless he is, and I'm fairly certain that he has officially died at the end of this episode. Of course, they don't show it for sure, but he looks pretty far gone that I don't think he would survive much into the next episode if he isn't dead already. But the one moment that stood out for me that I just was insta tears was Viserys, obviously making that march from the door up to the Iron Throne. And he gets to the stairs and he trips a little bit and his crown falls off. And there's an arm that reaches out to grab him, and hold him up. And he pushes them away. I told you I don't need help, because he's trying so much to still have that pride and still be that king. And when he turns to look, it's Daemon, and Daemon has picked up his crown and is like, come on, you've got this. And that just, I'm tearing up right now, like thinking about it, that just was so amazing to see, because though it didn't last long, because Daemon is Daemon after all, and we got to see what happens, when you go against Rhaenyra and Daemon is anywhere near you, the tongue lull and gross, but just that moment of brotherly love and that moment of compassion, you could see, this other side to Daemon that I think maybe only Rhaenyra had known prior to that, because there's always been this competition between Daemon and Viserys, and there's always been this, kind of battle between them. And now you finally got to see that Daemon has calmed a bit and is capable of showing compassion to his brother when it is a good moment for that to happen. So a lot going on in this episode. Definitely one of my favorites so far of the season, just in character development and the show of like the overall writing, because really like taking a book or a book series like these are and turning them into a television show is not always a guaranteed win. Just because you have a very popular book doesn't mean you're going to have a very popular television show. And that has been shown to us over and over again in Hollywood recently, that not everything is adapted in a good way or a way that audiences are connected to and continue to lock in on. And I think House of the Dragon is one of those rare gems that's happening right now, where we really see that there is a good writing team and a good set of actors, and it goes a very long way for this show. So those are my thoughts. I would love to know what your thoughts of this episode of House of the Dragon are. Please subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family, and I'd love to see you in the next episode.